So, some more of the history about how embedded Greek gods or mythology is in America. So, you could look at this very much like, well, long before creation was created, there was the heavens and the angels and God. And everybody knows the story about how Lucifer wanted to be God, so he was casted out of heaven. And he was the serpent that tempted Eve to take the apple. Well, that same serpent could possibly have been behind all the Greek mythology gods. So then go to the Israeli Exodus, the Moses taking the Israelites out of slavery. And they were enslaved in Egypt. So it says here, old King Pharaoh died and a new king ascended the throne. He had no sympathy or love for the children of Israel and chose to forget all that Joseph had done for Egypt. He decided to take action against the growing influence and numbers of children of Israel. He called his council together and they advised him to enslave these people and oppress them before they grew too powerful. Pharaoh limited the personal freedom of the Hebrews, but by putting heavy taxes on them, and he recruited the men into forced labor battalions under the supervision of harsh taskmasters. Thus, the children of Israel had to build cities, erect mountains, construct roads, work on quarries, and hew stones. The children of Israel had to build cities, erect mountains, as I said. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them and the harder the restrictions they imposed upon them became, the more the children of Israel increased and multiplied. Finally, when King Pharaoh saw that forcing the Hebrews to do hard work did not succeed in suppressing their rapidly growing numbers, he decreed that all newly born male children of Hebrews be thrown into the Nile River. Only daughters should be permitted to live. So this was the slavery that they were in, the Israelites were in. And Moses, most people know the story of Moses, and this is why the medical, it doesn't teach about the medical symbol that I showed yesterday with the staff and the serpent around it. But if you go on one of the major medical sites that medical professionals use, it talks about it. They say it goes back to Moses. So throughout the wilderness, everybody or most people know the story. The Israelites were in the wilderness forever. They missed their slavery because they were uncomfortable, and they whined and they complained, and they kept worshiping false gods. And even though God kept telling them through Moses, don't do this. So there was a serpent that was released by God as judgment against them for their sins, because here he was taking them to the promised land, taking them out of slavery, and they were still sinning. So God sent poisonous serpents into the camp, and people began to die. This showed the people that they were the ones in sin, and they came to Moses to confess their sins and ask for God's mercy. When Moses prayed for the people, God instructed him to make a bronze serpent and put it on a pole so that people could be healed. God was teaching the people something about faith. It is totally illogical to think that looking at a bronze image could heal anyone from a snake bite. But that is exactly what God told them to do. It took an act of faith in God's plan for anyone to be healed, and the serpent on the stick was a reminder of their sin, which brought about their suffering. This serpent, so what happens, and this goes on to say, this shows how easy it is for us to take the things of God and twist them into idolatry. We must never worship the tools or the people God chooses to use, but always bring the honor and glory to God alone. So what did the medical professional do? They used it as a symbol of idolatry. They just didn't tell anybody about it. but it's on your prescription pads. It's on, I mean, some of them. It was even at one time doctors wore the pin on their jacket. So a little history, just briefly here, about just because there's so many Greek gods, so many. It's mind blowing, really. The Greek gods were created by man to explain the world around them, act as a means of exploration, provide legitimacy and authority to ancient Greeks, and provide entertainment for the masses. The religion of the ancient Greeks did not have a single source of written scripture such as the Bible. So, there is another god. There's so many gods, but this one's interesting too because it ties to the medical system, and maybe it ties to other corporations. But it's this is Kronos. Isn't he a nice god? It's just ridiculous. So this is the god of Kronos. He is the father of time and Saturn, and he's considered the crooked one. These are the other names he goes by: Father of Time, Saturn, and the Crooked One. So what's interesting about the medical community, all of them, and probably other corporations, but I know for sure in the hospitals, is we do our timesheets in a program on the computer called Kronos. And he's the god of Kronos. And it shows that it was spelled with a C, but it says here, because on the program in the medical system where you do your timesheet, it is spelled exactly the way it's accurately spelled, which is Kronos. More accurately, Kronos, spelled with a K, ascended the throne after defeating his father Uranus. Soon he was warned by a prophecy that he would be dethroned by his own son. In order to avoid this fate, he swallowed each of his children as they were born. The last child, Zeus, was spared because Kronos' wife, Rhea, handed him over to Gaia as soon as he was born to be raised in secret. And yet our medical system uses Kronos, is what the program is called. Father or God of Time, or Father of Time. Also, the other ways that this mythology is in our government, in everything, is in Washington, D.C., such as buildings that were created. So Greek temples were grand buildings with a fairly simple design. The outside was surrounded by a row of columns. Above the columns was a decorative panel of sculpture. And here's one of those in Washington, the White House. Union Station in Washington, D.C. The U.S. Capitol. The Jefferson Memorial. Federal Reserve Building. The U.S. Supreme Court Building. Library of Congress. Lincoln Memorial. National Archives Building. So it's everywhere. And as I've said, temples. We don't call the U.S. Capitol a temple, but it's all this Greek mythology. And people can say, "Oh, it's just Greek architect," but it's all over Washington. We have all of this stuff that everything in our country right now, all of the systems, all the corporations, your major corporations, industries, agencies, are so corrupted to the core because they have been rooted in soil of the serpent. And that's my opinion. Because even nursing, okay, I probably have a picture of this, but the nursing education even has these emblems, and symbols matter because it's the roots of where those symbols go to. And as I said, whatever it's in, what the soil in, what's the soil it's in is important. So this picture, which is probably really, it's too hard to see. But this is on every nursing book. I'll show a better picture of it. It's on every single nursing book. Elsevier, Mosby, these are the nursing books, all of them. See it? It's like a garden, isn't it? It's like a serpent around the tree. And so symbols matter to many people, just like, the symbol of the cross is important to Christians. Well, these symbols that are throughout the United States, or definitely in Washington and in many of our industries, it says why they've become so bad. Our founding fathers they fled this type of stuff. They fled being persecuted for their faith because their faith was belief in the true God, the scriptural God. The historical evidence of that, and Jesus, who was God in flesh. And people have this idea that they believe in God, or they believe in Jesus, but they don't believe that he was the Son of God or God in flesh. Well, he healed, he raised from the dead. All of the people that wrote about those things in the Gospels would have never wrote about it if it wasn't true. Because you're not going to make something up when you know you're going to be persecuted. Many of them were nailed to crosses. Why would you do that when you know it's not? They knew it was true. So that's the whole historical evidence. None of this mythology, there's no rooting of it to be true. And what does the media and so many people go after the most? And it's always bothered me because it's America. And yes, we're a melting pot, but our values were built on the Bible, because there's only two countries that there was a covenant with God, a promise, a contract made with God, and that those countries are the United States and Israel. And it's why I think even under all this filth of this Greek mythology stuff, that we've managed to flourish. God's protected us, but it's gotten to a point now it's out of control, and we're all responsible for it. We all need to repent. We all need to return to the values of what the founding fathers built this, started this country on, which was that promise made with God. We have to place God as the priority. I'm not trying to sound all preachy. I'm just saying this is how everything gets out of control. The whole medical system needs to just be, I can't even say it needs to be rebuilt. Maybe something else can be built that's better, that's big, but the foundation of it is all rotted. It's why the American Nurses Association, the American Physician Associations, all these associations, they got rid of all holistic medicine, because it was a threat. And then you get your Rockefellers and these type snake oil salesmen that have all this money, and they can buy these associations off. I have no respect. I've said many times, no respect for these associations, because they're not about, the very fact, it bothers me so much how they talk about health and safety. And it's like, you are such liars, such liars. And even the medical system, many in it right now, they just believe whatever they're told. The dumbing down of society is the worst part about this, because this is not hard to believe. It's just that most people have been so brainwashed to be busy on stupid stuff like their phone or their games or living in sin. And, I mean, because we've been living in a world that basically has been dominated by the serpent, and we all fall victim to it at times. But it's time for people to realize that something bad is happening, and the only way this country will be saved and the next generation can live in freedom is if we, the people, we start speaking up and standing up, and we find that voice inside of us that says, no, I'm not doing it. I don't care what the cost is. I don't care what you do to me. Because that's how I feel. I don't care what you do to me. I don't care what I lose. It's that important. We need everybody to do that. As long as everybody sits back and says somebody else will take care of it, ask yourself, when God comes to you someday, whether it's this life or next or whenever, and that moment comes and God says, what did you do to help save your country, help save the children? And you say, well, I didn't really do a whole lot. I just waited for somebody else to do it. That probably wouldn't be a good thing. That's just my opinion. Because look at this god of Kronos, that picture again I showed you. What is he doing to the child? Looks like he's eating him, right? Well, there's a lot of people in this country that believe this whole adrenochrome thing. And who's to say that's not true? If all this Greek mythology was rooted because of the original serpent that was casted out, Lucifer, from heaven, then he could easily manipulate people believing all these different gods, send everybody astray, even the United States.